help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. So we had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. And the day that this podcast comes out is October the 17th, which means we are in the midst of Halloween season. Whether we acknowledge that or not, we will discuss that. And there is nothing scarier in the world than abortion. And so we will address today exorcisms, Satan, and abortion.
All the bad things.
Yes, and I will go on ahead early in the podcast to get this wonderful Dana Carvey reference over with.
And who could it have been? Let's see, I don't know. Let me think. Let me knock on Mr. Noggin. Who could trick us into doing that? Could have been Satan.
Thank you, church lady. A great character on Saturday Night Live back when it was funny. We need more church ladies because she would blame Satan for things, and now we're all so good. There is no Satan. There's just kind of bad things that sometimes happen in the world, and even though the Satanists are doing abortions now, we'll talk about that.
They're just misunderstood.
Just misunderstood. So, Steve, Halloween is controversial.
Yes.
So let's just lay it out there and let the emails fly. You have, here's the two camps. Here's the two camps, okay? You and the kids and everybody dress up like vampires and witches and celebrate the demonic. That's one side. The other side, you go into a cave in Wyoming and you don't participate. Halloween is evil. It celebrates the demonic. And somewhere in the middle is the history of Halloween, which is Hallows Eve, the day before All Saints Day, one of the greatest days, on November the 1st. So in the midst of that, of you worshiping the devil and trying to escape all of the Halloween frenzy, but not be a complete weirdo, where do you fall in?
We, I guess, take the middle ground where I think everybody's offended. We don't refuse to acknowledge Halloween, but we also don't have our kids dress up like witches and demons either. So I think the little kids usually dress up as the saint that's associated with their name. Though I think the last year...
We get the weird saint kids at our house, too.
Yeah. I think the last year that Peter dressed up, he went as a rapper. So I'm not really sure how that fits in.
Totally legit.
Yeah.
Is it Eminem?
It's by MC Hammer.
I don't know. He had like this necklace with a big dollar sign. It looked really good.
Hey, I'd put forward that MC Hammer could easily end up as a saint. I mean, he wrote, "We got to pray just to make it today."
Yeah, so would it be...
It's completely accurate.
You know how
That
there's
should be our new theme music.
if there's a pope that's
for
a
the
saint-
world.
Hard to argue with that. But if there's a pope that's a saint, it's like, what is it, Saint Pope John Paul II? Would it be like Saint MC Hammer, or would it be MC Saint Hammer?
It would be, that's a good question. It would be MC Saint Hammer.
Okay.
And he in his strive for holiness, he was too legit to quit.
Absolutely.
Hey.
But I mean, You Can't Touch This came out. I had the Emerson Walkman, and with the headphones, and you had to get a tape, which I've explained to my kids. I even said I was going to tape a football game a few weeks ago, and they're like, "Oh
yeah,
tape the game."
Oh yeah.
So that was my first cassette tape. Was MC Hammer. You Can't Touch This. So I totally think he could be up for sanctity, but we have a lot to cover on this. So basically the same thing as far as the weird Halloween thing. And it's kind of one of those, it becomes a pain because it's just this cultural phenomenon. But it's a great time of year It's a great Halloween's a good excuse to point out evil, which is what we're going to do today.
Yes.
And what is actually evil and what is not. And I think one thing that has gotten weirder over the years is scary movies. So, as you know, I love movies, and you've never seen any good movies. But one of my favorite movies, and this will definitely get emails about this, is the original Halloween.
Okay.
Now, one of the reasons I like Michael Myers, and this is the only is that he takes chastity to the extreme. So if you are engaging in fornication or premarital sex, he will punish you by putting a butcher knife through your back. And so it's like you hear all the chastity talks, and you're like, that's all nice and good, but Michael Myers, he will scare people.
So we get
into chastity.
The Theology of the Body conference, and you've got like Christopher West, Stefanik, Jason Evert, and Michael Myers.
Michael Myers, except Michael Myers, he's just showing, he doesn't talk, as in case you haven't seen the movies. Have you seen Halloween?
No.
Okay. I'm alone on this one, clearly. So he doesn't talk.
I did know that much.
And there's like a million of them, but the first two are very good, like from a movie perspective. Okay. And one of the reasons that they're good is because Michael Myers is actually evil. That's what the shrink says. The shrink isn't like, well, he had a very difficult childhood and this can be explained away. No, he said he's pure evil. So that's what I like about it, is they kind of call evil for what it is. People may think it's crazy because they hate the movie Halloween or whatever, but the baby boomers love it. And I rip on the baby boomers a lot because they deserve it. But any baby boomer you meet, they're like, oh, I remember when I saw that in the theater. So
everybody has that same voice.
Yeah, everybody, especially on this podcast, ironically. But on a much deeper level. So now they just cut people up, and it's sensational, scary movies. I don't watch all that crap because it is celebrating the sadistic and it is celebrating evil. It's not calling it out and highlighting it. It's just sensational to where these kids these days become numb to it. But the greatest scary movie of all time is the
Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters.
I was so close.
Ghostbusters
So close.
last night.
It's excellent.
Give us a quote. Just get it out of your system.
Oh, I don't know where to begin, Sean. But you know, if you're talking evil,
this chick is toast.
Yeah.
Vigo from Ghostbusters 2 was also very evil. He was the scourge of Carpathia and the sorrow of Moldavia. And he tried to possess the kid named Oscar. There, I've got it out of my system. I feel good.
Hey, one of the cool things about Ghostbusters is every kid, like my kids, us, our parents, everyone knows who Slimer is.
Yeah.
It's like referencing Mickey Mouse. Like you say Slimer in any home, even the family out in Wyoming that's like hiding from Halloween, they're like, well, we like Slimer. I mean, that's a great movie. Yeah. No, the greatest scary movie of all time is The Exorcist. Because to the level that I just spoke out of, like calling out evil, which Halloween the movie does it in a weird way. The guy's walking around a little town. Somehow no one notices, like, first off, if you have a station wagon out of the 70s, you have to sell it now because everybody thinks that you're Michael Myers. So if you've never seen the movie and you're driving around like a station wagon that was made between 1970 and 1984, everyone thinks you're a serial killer. So sell it immediately. But The Exorcist takes it head on. And this is the 50th anniversary of the release of The Exorcist. Have you seen the original Exorcist? No. I didn't think so. Okay. Now, there's really a lot of good, because it's not like Halloween where people are like, that movie's so stupid. Like, he was stabbed 5 times and then he does like a perfect sit-up. Like Michael Myers has a six-pack, you know, and he drinks no water, eats no food. He's walking around all day. He doesn't have to go to the bathroom, you know, but The Exorcist is very realistic because, number one, it's just some stats. 50 years released. When you do inflation, it's the 9th grossing movie of all time.
It's a pretty impressive number.
I think that's encouraging because we're like still longing for a story about good and evil. There are a billion reasons not to see it. I know you haven't seen it. Mary Lisa will never watch it ever again. I made her watch it when we were dating, and she's like tells the story all the time. But for people who, if you're willing to watch it and I guess can endure it, from the artistic standpoint, it's phenomenal. It's so well shot. The story is accurate. William Peter Blatty wrote it. He has a theology degree from Georgetown, back when Georgetown was actually Catholic. And he wrote this beautiful, he read this story, beautiful story about a boy who had an exorcism and it worked. And so he adjusts it and he makes it about a girl. The movie is scary, it's creepy, it's not for everybody. But if you're gonna make a movie, I don't think you can halfway go there. You just can't have the goofy thing where it's the guy with the chainsaw. And you also can't have an absence of the supernatural. And to me, The Exorcist takes it head on. It's theologically accurate. The priest is the one saying, she's just crazy. I'm a psychiatrist. It's not, the priest himself is having a crisis of faith. And there's a beautiful scene. Most people don't realize that the exorcist in the movie is a real priest, the old man at the end. He's on the cover, probably one of the most famous covers ever. But there's a moment where the shrink priest, the academic who's going to explain it away, and basically says he didn't even know how exorcisms are performed, and the church, doesn't even practice it anymore because it's not the 14th century. All the arguments that an atheist would have against the demonic are in the movie. And it's one of the best, it's evil. Stop talking, stop quoting, don't try to explain this away. We're dealing with pure evil, and you better get your spiritual armor on. And, good conquers evil in the movie, but it's not for everyone. But if you're interested in reading a great book, there is a book by Father Gabriel Amherst, who was the chief exorcist of Rome, called An Exorcist Tells His Story, put out by our friends at Ignatius Press. One of the best-selling books ever put out by Ignatius Press. So An Exorcist Tells His Story. He was the chief exorcist of Rome. And then they made a recent Exorcist. I haven't seen any of the other Exorcists. I've just seen the first one, and I think it's great. But the one they just made, Russell Crowe plays Father Gabriel Amherst. Little fact of life. But anyways, one of the reasons we're referencing these, Halloween, but also more importantly, The Exorcist, is that when Pope Benedict, Cardinal Ratzinger, we don't like to bring up the Pope a lot because we know that we don't want to run off all the evangelical Christians, but this is a quote that when Pope Benedict was Pope, he was asked by this secular news outlet in France, what is your greatest fear? And he said, my greatest fear is that the West lives as if God did not exist. And I think that there is this tendency to get rid of the supernatural or ignore it, to talk about how all good and tolerant we are, or to talk about how evil we are without defining what evil is, which evil usually boils down to intolerance or you're not nice. Or you won't let me do whatever I want all the time. And art can call us back. Art, a great picture can call us back. People talk about the Last Judgment. You go in the Sistine Chapel. I've never seen it.
Truth, beauty, and goodness. And beauty is one of those, and people increasingly reject truth. So beauty is a way for us to access truths we might otherwise reject.
This is my justification of promoting The Exorcist on the podcast. So
There
thank
you
you for
go.
wording that.
That's why I brought up
properly.
Ghostbusters, too.
Yeah. And Slimer would have never had an abortion. He was a weird guy, but he looked like a booger, but he never would have had an abortion. He was definitely pro-life. So so here's the temptation, I think, for us in the pro-life movement is that we have to acknowledge with confidence and faith in Jesus Christ that this is evil and not cower to it and not obsess over it.
Yeah.
Because you have demonic guy. We're fighting evil. But that's his one-liner that he says all the time.
Yeah, it's like the sirens and the rocks in the Greek mythology. We've got to sort of chart that middle course. Otherwise, you can really... it gets strange, right? You need to acknowledge it because it's real, and the demonic plays a huge role in abortion, child sacrifice. This is throughout all the ages. We've done various podcasts on the topic of child sacrifice, and the demons are always involved. But there's also where you kind of forget that this is about Jesus, and you're just demon hunter mode, and that's not going to be very good for us either.
I think also there's a sensational thing to it. And I see this with all these different Exorcist movies or these stupid, scary movies these days, where it's just the guy that's he's like trying to prove that he's not scared of it, or prove that he, can talk about evil or the devil or whatever. And sometimes that can be more sensational and less serious. That's another reason I like The Exorcist, the movie. It's a quiet movie. It's a slow movie. It takes forever. And that's how the devil works. He's very patient. But I think that instead of sensationalizing it, it can be something that we absolutely have to acknowledge in the spiritual warfare of the pro-life movement.
Yeah. I mean, it's important. I think that comes down to knowing yourself too, and knowing what your weaknesses are. So, like you said, focusing a lot on demons and demonology and all that sort of thing. Like, yes, it's good to know. I don't want to watch any movies like that because I don't want to have nightmares. But I do like listening to real life exorcists kind of share what they share, because
that's even worse.
But not all the time. I'm just saying, like,
when
just
she's taking
enough.
a break from her murder.
I know.
Yeah, when she's taking a break
crime.
from, what's it called? True crime.
True crime. No, a little bit.
You need something fluffy on your listening list.
I watch comedies. I watch a lot of comedies.
Okay.
I don't upset. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I just like a little. I want to
turn on the Pantera.
I want to listen to a little
I'm getting on the treadmill.
A little bit enough to know what's going on and what. I mean, even over the weekend, there was a conference in Austin where it featured a well-known exorcist, and some of my friends were telling me about how that went and just some of the things that he brought up, the topics that he brought up. And these are things I'm like, I want to hear about this. I want to hear what they have to say about this, because I don't want to be entering into something that might be a portal for demons. If these exorcists who can, it's from the horse's mouth, they've seen it themselves. I want to know enough to educate myself and know what to avoid without obsessing and just constantly, despite what this podcast has shared, I don't obsess over true crime and listen to it nonstop. I have a good balance.
That's what I would say if I were you too.
Yeah, of course. Well,
but
whatever.
If you could go to a group of Catholics, Baptists, atheists, agnostics, and say, hey, in room 209, there's an exorcist giving a talk, and everybody's leaving whatever they're doing and they're going to listen to that. I think we're interested in it, and I think it's beyond just the intrigue. I think that's what lures people in, and Hollywood makes a lot of money off of it. But I think there is a natural, if I know what the devil's thinking, then it'll help me grow in virtue. It'll help me avoid him, frankly.
Yeah.
And that's why Screw Tape is so popular by C.S. Lewis. And to me, Screw Tape and The Exorcist are both really, really scary. And I don't want to watch or read them every day all year. But I need to dip in every so often because of that reason.
And that's why I pick on Heather a little bit, but I think it's the right approach to like learn about it. But this is why I would never want to witness an exorcism, is because I kind of would like to witness an exorcism.
What's wrong with you? I've never thought of that. And I love the movie.
We have a 40 Days for Life leader who is like on an exorcism team, because like sometimes the people start levitating and he's a big dude and he can like help hold them down. He's told me some stories. I'm like,
wait a second. That's not a softball team. The Exorcist.
No,
this isn't a bowling team in Toledo.
This is real. This is real. And
they allow. He's Catholic.
Yes.
They allow lay people to be on the Exorcist team to hold the guy down.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And he's told me some stories. Like, he doesn't sensationalize it, but he's told some stories. And like, wow, that'd be wild to see like a dude floating. And then like, wait, I'm off base here. So I think Heather and you guys have the right approach to it. I do not.
Do you know a priest that is an exorcist?
I know of them, but I don't know them personally.
Okay. They're not supposed to reveal it.
It seems like it always gets out though, doesn't it? Like,
it does.
We kind of know it's Father.
It does. There's also a conference they have to go to once a year. So, it's kind of like, oh, what are you doing? So I do know of one. And they don't talk about it. There's no sensationalism. They will always say the same thing, which is, it is real.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, 99% of the cases they get, you just have a bad kid. He's not possessed. You just don't discipline him. It's like, or it's psychological, but when you get into the foreign languages, that's what's amazing as far as like the education you get on the movie. Because when it came out, Hollywood, everybody thought it was like Hollywood, and then they're like, that's actually what the Catholic Church teaches. You're speaking a foreign language you've never known or studied. levitating is obviously a big one. That's not typical behavior.
This is why when that came out, there's like, and the Vatican doesn't want you to see this movie. And then the church was like, I mean, we're not going to take a stand pro movie, but they're not wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did not. They didn't want the movie out for that reason. But it was very for the average layperson. You're sitting here going, and they had a great director, and it had good sound and good acting, and that always helps. It's so easy to, I'm sure, make a very bad, scary movie, and there have been many of them. But it's got to have the depth, and I think that what you're saying is the last thing I thought you were going to say on this podcast is I'd like to witness one. Like, what?
I really would.
So
kind of really would.
You watch the movie that's fake? No way. But there have been a few examples where we have, I'd say definitely, the first time I came in this place, I felt the presence of evil. And this is the closed Planned Parenthood where abortion, went on for a number of years. And we acquired the building on November 2nd of 2014. We came with a priest and at the time our board chair. We made the priest go in first. There were just three of us, and he did you can do an exorcism on a medical building that you don't have to go and get permission for. And so he did it, and it was the salt, and it was the holy water, and the prayers were absolutely beautiful. And then we had all these great evangelicals come in and pray over the building and write scriptures on the walls before we remodeled and painted, so the whole place is covered in scripture. But I think there has to be that fundamental acknowledgement that this is evil. And my son, just a few days ago, actually, he's a freshman, and we're driving, and he's in an ethics class at school, and they're discussing. There was some proposed legislation in Holland and other European countries that didn't go through, but they were studying Peter Singer, okay, who we've covered on the podcast, okay? Not one you want around the Christmas breakfast table. And Peter Singer was a huge advocate of being able to have infanticide up to 6 months. Mm-hmm. And because there was a rule about animals and pets, and he didn't view babies, he viewed babies as animals because they're unreasonable, because all adults are totally reasonable and deserve to live. And they're not self-aware. That was his big thing, self-awareness with Peter Singer. And so my son asked me, how could somebody kill a baby? Because my brother-in-law just had a baby. And so we were all holding his new son last week at the baptism. And, he's a week old, 2 weeks old. And so I referenced the baby, his cousin, Judah, and he said, how could anybody do that to a baby? And I said, I don't know. I said, I can give you all these answers, but the answer is evil. There's some things, and people, I love it when Abby says that. People come up and they're like, how could you work in the abortion industry? How come you didn't see the dead baby and he didn't run out and jump over the fence? And she says, I don't know. Evil is the answer. But I think that there has to be a point where we get in here, we have to acknowledge the evil, but we don't have to have all the answers. Just like we don't have all the answers for God.
Well, most of those things, they didn't go from step A to step Z. One of the things that many former workers, and including Abby, will say is sin works little by little. She didn't go from being this good Christian, being brought up in a good Christian home to in the POC lab. There were steps in between that gradually she worked towards that. And that's why we have to know our own strengths and weaknesses and set hard boundaries for ourselves, because the next thing you know, you're rationalizing here and, well, that's not so bad. And then this is not so bad. And then now you're in the POC lab counting baby parts.
Not to hammer the listeners, but in The Exorcist, the movie, they do that. And there's subtleties, because you're just following this mom and her daughter, and you're like, there's nothing wrong here. They're like a happy family, and you start noticing the mom is constantly taking the Lord's name in vain. It's not like blatant, but it's subtle. And then the daughter plays with a Ouija board. and it seems all innocent. You just have these small things. The daughter has an
It's
imaginary.
just a game. It's, you know, whatever.
There's a lot of the movie is kind of covered in this innocence, and it's for that reason. Just as Screw Tape Letters is, you know, where he'll follow somebody, and you're like, Tom is a great Christian man, you know, and they follow him around, and then you realize the guy's just on his way to hell. And I think that's the brilliance of it, because you're right. It's not one thing after another. Do you want to tell the Ransom story? Because I know it's in the original 40 Days for Life book that I wrote with David B. Wright, but I kind of lived through that with him. What did you read that? And was that the first time that you had ever heard that story?
It was the first time I had ever heard that story, and I would say too, when I would be on the road, closer when the book was released, and people would bring up a chapter, that's the chapter that came up most, that people brought up to me most. Like, oh man, that Ransom chapter. So the story is a building on Ransom Street. It's in Michigan, and Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was an abortion facility in 1994, and a decade later, pro-lifers got the building. They acquired the building, as so often happens, like the building that we're sitting in right now recording this podcast. And so they get the building, and 5 days, literally only 5 days, less than a week after the last abortion, they brought in people to pray through the building. Just pray. People came here and wrote the scriptures on the wall. We're going to pray. I think 125 people. Then later, 9 different people walked through the building just on a mission to pray. And the moment those 9 people concluded their prayer, said amen, the locked door flies open, and there's a gust of air out. There's a gentle breeze of air in. And as they said at the time, they felt that it was a spiritual transfer of ownership. What's really wild about that, I mean, that's pretty wild already. But some passerby stopped and like knocks on the door and like, hey, what happened to your like gargoyle statue? They're like, what are you talking about, gargoyle statue? There's like a big, strong, like demon-looking dude like perched on the top of your building all these years, and it's gone today. There had apparently never been such a statue there, but somebody had seen something, convinced that it was real. Who knows exactly what it was, but it would sure seem likely, given all the rest of the story, that perhaps there was, in fact, an exorcism of that building.
Mm. What I love about that story is even if everybody involved is a nut, it still makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not that you saw the Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters walking in the Atlantic Ocean, and you're just like, no, you don't understand, and you're like, I've seen Ghostbusters, it's not real. It's that stories like that are completely in line with accurate teachings about good and evil.
Yeah, that's true. And I get a kick out of this because I'm pretty confident that this podcast will be quoted probably by British media someday. Look at these Americans. Like it's almost guaranteed, right?
Can we quote The Guardian now?
Yeah, we can quote The
All right,
Guardian.
here's The Guardian. Even if The Guardian will write articles like, worried about, this is a great reference. This is from The Guardian. We're quoting The Guardian. Worried about abortion and demonic possession? You'd make a great Republican politician.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I kind of wish that was true, but I don't know if you hear a lot of politicians. Certainly now the Republicans are terrified of abortion, but I don't know if you hear a lot of. Maybe you hear a lot of evil references. Is that what they're talking about? Or demonic possession?
There was specifically someone who was pro-life, a pro-life candidate, and said that abortion is a tool of the devil. Basically saying the same stuff we're saying right here now in an understated way. But of course, they've got to come in and be like, look at these backwards, superstitious Christians.
Because what happened, Heather? We for years have said abortion is evil. Mm-hmm. And The Guardian writes this. We're crazy. We're lunatics. Mm-hmm. Abortion is a tool of the devil. Oh, you guys are out there. Then the devil chimes in through his representatives. The Satanists, who aren't really silent or apologetic anymore, it's like Rosemary's Baby on like steroids. The Satanists are now doing abortions, promoting abortions, and marrying themselves to Planned Parenthood. And the most extreme example is this, we are not making this up, Samuel Alito's mom's satanic abortion clinic.
SAMSAC. That's the acronym. They're literally using that continue.
Oh, they're using that's
yeah,
not a Heatherism.
Sure,
Okay.
Sure. I think we all thought they were going to be doing that.
Okay,
but yeah.
so we do not recommend the T-shirt. But that stands for Samuel Alito's mom's satanic abortion clinic. You know what's awesome about this? Number one, God bless Samuel Alito.
Samuel Alito, the justice.
And God bless Samuel Alito. He wrote the opinion.
Yes.
And the opinion is brilliant. I haven't had one reporter or politician or pro-abortion advocate cite what was wrong in Alito's opinion overturning Roe. We did this little outrage about Roe and women dying in the streets. What was wrong with overturning Roe? Like, what did they get wrong, right? And the dissents don't cover that either. The dissents are terrible, okay? But that whole notion that just set people off, mainly the Satanists, to open up their own abortion facility is twofold. Number one, yes, we've been saying it for years, abortion thrives on evil, and evil loves abortion. Number two, evil's talking points aren't so great and has entered the realm of goofy.
Yeah, that's true. Well, now they're more blatant about it. Speaking of goofy, though, what I think is goofy, I don't know, maybe goofy's not the right way to describe it, but
they're naming an abortion clinic after
that's,
Supreme Court Justice's
that's goofy.
Mom.
That's goofy. But you have like all of these people coming forward. We've seen it even 10 years ago at the state capitol here in Texas, where this was a headline around the world, Hail Satan, where they were chanting that at the pro-lifers in the rotunda when pro-lifers were peacefully praying and singing Amazing Grace. And you've got these people shouting that. And I think some of them believe it, but truly believe it and do worship the devil and are, embracing evil. But I think a lot of people are, it's the shock factor. And they want to shock the little sensitive Christians and the rest of the world. And it's like a trendy thing to be a Satanist now and to get into all of this stuff. And that's goofy and also dangerous to me.
But it's like playing with the Ouija board or dabbling in the occult. We'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
But the devil uses goofiness. He uses fun. He uses entertainment. He uses fads. Yeah. He uses you will stand out, non serviam. You will be different. And that will, he uses goofy. And this is a classic example. By the way, we break this down in an entire podcast. If you're like, what are they talking about with Samuel Alito's mom's abortion clinic in New Mexico? We have a whole podcast on basically the rise of the Satanist visibility and their acceptance from the abortion industry, which is unprecedented and is a post-Roe phenomenon. And that episode is season 8. Episode 9, season 8, episode 9, 8-9, easy to remember. The Devil is in the Details is the title of that podcast. Do you want to talk about Satan Con?
I have never heard of it until today.
Okay, Steve, you can be Satan Con.
This is creepy.
Guy.
Yeah, so there's all the different conventions that are popular now. You've got
This is going to come on me.
That's how you're starting?
Yeah.
Some people like to go learn about baseball cards.
That's right.
Some people, that's how you're setting it up. You know the many different conventions going on throughout the country.
We all have our different interests, do we not?
We have the symposium.
Some
in
people
Orlando.
don't like broccoli.
Okay.
Yeah,
Then the Satan Con. Okay.
I don't know how else to lead into it because this is where we have arrived. There's nowhere else to descend to from Satan, right?
Yeah.
But they've got their own convention. They call it Satan Con, and they've made reproductive rights, reproductive justice, whatever they want to call it, a big part of it. One of the workshops was titled Reimagining Lilith as an Archetype for Reproductive Justice. Lilith, of course, being a demon.
Yeah.
Actually, the Portland abortion facility is named the Lilith Clinic.
Really?
And
Yes.
you have the Lilith Fund.
I did not know that.
Oh.
Well, see, that's not the goofy part.
No.
Because that's the serious part because they're naming it after an actual demon. And, of course, no one knows who Lilith is. Wow.
And some people are like, ha, 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 look at this, we're naming it after a demon. But, like, the devil's going to take his followers, whether they're devout and sincere about it or whether they're just idiots. And I think you're getting some of both.
Here's who this is disrespectful to. And it's not us because we're Christians. We're not offended by the devil because we know that he loses. St. Teresa of Avila has that great quote where demons would appear to her and try to scare her so she would lose her faith. And she would wake up and just see a demon sitting in the corner of her room. And she would say, "Oh, it's just you," and go back to sleep. Like it's a great, like, total peace and confidence in God. But that's not who it's offensive to, is us. It's offensive to people, and the way I hear it is soldiers in war and addicts who say, "I was in hell, and what I saw, lived through, experienced, did." When I went up to Huntsville and spoke in the maximum security prison and we showed Unplanned, they were all murderers and rapists. And they all believed in the devil. And they all believed in actual evil. And they would not be giggling at the Samuel Alito's mom's abortion clinic. And I think that it's disrespectful to those who have actually lived hell on earth. And that just shows the devil could care less about any soul.
And those who are going through the hell of contemplating abortion, right? We've talked, how many years have we said the women showing up for an abortion are not there because they're pro-Biden instead of Trump, or because they loved Obama, or because they vote this way or that. They're there because they're desperate. They feel they don't have a choice. This is why I kind of doubt that they're going to get a lot of business at SAMSAC, because I just don't think any woman who's like legitimately struggling through this decision is like, can I go here? Can I go to the pregnancy center? I know, Samuel Alito's mom's satanic abortion clinic. I don't know.
I like it. I think it's just a straight up deterrent.
That's what I was thinking too. That's got to be a deterrent for most women, because whether or not you're pro-abortion or whatever, like nobody, the Shout Your Abortion T-shirts did not take off. People, despite what they want us to believe, women do not want to shout their abortions. They don't want to tell the world they've had abortion. They don't want to brag about their abortion. Most women, and they're not going to want to, even if they're not even Christian or not even sure about God, like. I'm going into a facility that has Satan's name on it. You know, it's like it's satanic temple, you know.
I still think the strongest forces for good and evil are the ones that we never see. Like some lady suffering with cancer who's taking care of her children and just offering it all up for God and being faithful in the midst of her suffering, like Jesus did on Good Friday. And also not the goofy Satanist guy running around with horns on his head in front of the abortion clinic, but the people who are participating in this evil to the level where they want as many babies to die as possible so they can make the most amount of money, and which is the business model of Planned Parenthood. And those people are very smart, they're very shrewd, and they hate this crap. They don't like the Samuel Alito abortion. This is the real evil of abortion is the legitimacy of it in society. That we're not outraged. And when you draw attention to yourself because you're being goofy and you're referencing Satan, they don't like that stuff.
Don't say the quiet part out loud. What are you doing?
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's sort of what we talked about recently on the podcast, where the humane abortion advocates, like, we just want to end suffering by killing those who are. Is that such a big deal? And a shocking number of people going, "Oh yeah, ending suffering. That sounds good." Like the devil's temptations in the desert, in many ways, of our Lord were just end suffering now. Turn these stones into bread.
The devil loves the misuse of compassion. Mm-hmm. He takes virtues, he manipulates them, and he doesn't want us to have morals. He wants us to have values.
Yes. And I do want to say, though, I think it's important to point out, given the topic of this podcast, that nobody should believe that everybody who works in an abortion facility is a Satan worshiper. In fact, most of them are not.
Right.
According to the abortion industry's numbers that they don't like admitting, a little over half of the abortion workers claim to be Christian. And whether they're practicing or not, that's not necessarily showing with the work that they're doing. But the fact of the matter is that they're participating in evil, whether they want to recognize it or not. And I think that being said, though, that kind of leads us into talking about Margaret Sanger and how she was a participant in the occult.
You want to knock that one out?
Oh, I'd love to. Everybody has their convention.
Steve has not been to the occult convention.
No, I haven't. I would refuse that assignment if I were asked to go undercover. So Margaret Sanger lost a daughter to pneumonia, and she's having a hard time grieving this. Like, she doesn't obviously have a traditional relationship with the Lord, so she can't turn to her faith as a consolation. So she wants to start communicating, sort of channeling the spirit of her daughter, and so she gets heavily involved in the occult.
Because she's raised Catholic, right?
Yeah,
and
she's
she
baptized. Well, she wasn't so much raised. It's kind of like her dad was super leftist atheist, but she was baptized. Ramona Trevino went out and spoke at the 40 Days for Life campaign from her hometown, and it had the event at the church where Margaret Sanger was baptized.
And she did not have a good childhood. We're not defending her, but the dad was nuts. But they had a bunch of kids, and I think that's where she came out with the quote years later of the most compassionate thing a large family can do to one of their children is to kill it.
Yeah, it was, again, this misuse of compassion. We had a big family. There was dysfunction. We suffered. You know what would have meant less suffering is less people to suffer. Kill them off.
Yeah.
And so that was her approach. But she's, even as she loses her own child to pneumonia, there's a real suffering there, a real sorrow, and it's misdirected, it's mischanneled, not toward our Lord, but toward hell and trying to channel that spirit. And in fact, we see this sort of develop in her thought and her philosophy as she goes on, where she says the efforts of she described infanticide and child sacrifice throughout history and throughout geography as, quote, the efforts of the feminine spirit to liberate itself. And then she's referencing the Canaanites, the pagan societies, all
Aztecs.
These. Yeah, not good at all. This is, you think about, I had the chance to go to Mexico back before we had Lourdes Varela, and 40 Days for Life was just getting started. I went down and helped work with some of the early leaders and get them off the ground. Now we've got 100 or more campaigns in Mexico itself. It's wonderful. But I took some time there to visit the Aztec temple where they had the sacrifices. And the skulls are there. They've got human skulls that are out as part of the exhibit. Very creepy, and it's very sanitized language on the text where you've got the English, Spanish.
Really?
And it'll be this is where the Aztecs did their offerings. Oh, what offerings, pray tell?
Oh, wow.
What were these rituals that you're talking about?
Hors d'oeuvres?
Yeah. Skull.
You know what? And that's so sad to hear. That shows how far Mexico has fallen, because that was the whole approach of how Catholicism spread throughout Mexico, and Our Lady of Guadalupe and Saint Juan Diego and everything, because the Aztecs were so evil. We're going to sort of cleanse our own country of this paganism.
This goes back 100 years or so, and this was something that was kind of shocking to me, because there's a real sort of Aztec culture there where they kind of take pride in their Aztec identity, which is fine. I don't have any, don't take pride in the human sacrifice part of it, but everyone has their traditions, and so many different traditions are able to be Christianized and brought to their fulfillment in Jesus Christ. But 100 years ago or so, you've got the socialist government kind of takes over, and they're looking to get rid of Christianity. So what do? Well, Christianity got rid of the Aztec, culture and got rid of the pagan religion. So let's go back to that. And so there was a deliberate move about 100 years ago to try to kick out the church and to welcome back what the church replaced.
That's the Aztec language being sanitized. This is where some religions came together to worship. That is the most anti-woke site on earth, I mean, that is the worst. That's like going to Auschwitz, and they have a sign on the door, that is this was a camp where certain religious people were encouraged to have a life of their own, and you're like, I don't think that's what this place was.
Yeah.
So, but the point you just made, which is a good one, is why we have to do podcasts like this, because we're not the abortion is evil, Satan's real, evil's real, everybody go watch The Exorcist, crazy people. This is Margaret Sanger herself celebrating the Aztecs, celebrating the Canaanites. And she's not alone. And this is on the we wish we were making it up, but we're not list. But Marie Stopes, who was a nut. The British abortion facility, they're all named after her. She started Marie Stopes. And now we've got white, crazy eugenics Marie Stopes and white, crazy, eugenic Margaret Sanger running down throughout Latin America with their abortion brands, running over to Africa with their abortion brands with this craziness. Marie Stopes wrote love letters to Hitler.
The experimental
Literally.
birth control programs in Puerto Rico.
I know. But I mean, let's say Heather wrote a love letter to Donald Trump. Okay, that would be like the most evil thing that she could do as a pro-life woman in the United States. Okay? That's nothing compared to writing a love letter to Hitler. Hitler wasn't in the 8th grade, by the way.
Yeah.
He was at the peak of his psychotic, eugenic tirade.
And he's the only person in history that we allow ourselves to acknowledge as evil. Like the one.
Yeah.
No, hell is a 1-bedroom apartment, and Adolf Hitler is sitting in it alone because the rest of us are good.
Yeah. Don't be Hitler. That's only our motto, if that even. Yeah.
Well, that's the whole thing, the what am I Hitler now? And I believe you have a new phrase. What were we talking about? It was about a month ago on the podcast, and people will die.
Yes.
Yes, that's it. If you don't take out the trash, people are going to die. And it's just like the excuse now for everything. People will die.
And then once it happens, people are literally dying.
People are literally dying.
Can you name one? Well, I mean, you know it's happening, though.
Right. Yeah. Whoopi Goldberg said, we're going to go back to the days where you were stepping over the dead women in the bathroom who were doing abortions on themselves and bled out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know where she was going to the bathroom, but it sounds pretty bad.
Right.
So that whole notion that that's Hitler now. Well, what am I, Hitler? It's like, no, you need to go the speed limit in the school zone. You know, am I the worst person ever? No, you're dangerous though to kids in the school zone. So, okay, moving on. Father Mark Barron says there are 2 types of abortion supporters. Number 1, those who are duped into my body, my choice. They are seduced by the devil to have abortions just like Eve was seduced by the devil to eating the apple. In both cases, the devil suggests that God is holding back the woman. You agree with that?
Yeah.
Me too. You're a woman, so I want to make sure.
I am. We know what women are.
The second group of abortion supporters, the activists, many of whom view abortion as a sacrament. This is on full display right now. We know from the Lord's temptations in the desert that the devil wants to be worshipped. We worship God by offering sacrifice. The offering of an innocent child through the blood sacrifice is a way in which the devil seeks to be worshipped.
One of our leaders the other day asked me, how could Planned Parenthood be a religious exemption? And I said, well, because of Satanism. Which I remember Abby talking about early on. Like, you watch, that's going to happen. They're going to start basically claiming religious exemptions. They should be able to.
What are they asking for a religious exemption for?
So that they can be able to do an abortion. So, like, if there's an abortion law banning abortion.
Like the guys who can smoke peyote because it's part of their religion, we can, like, normally it's illegal, but we're going to do it because this is
precisely.
It's an actual.
This is a sacrament, and they have used that word. They have used that word themselves. This is a sacrament for our worship of the devil.
And don't ask us. Ask Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
Right, which should be an essay, but it's one of those where it's on that list of, we say abortion's a sacrament to them, and they're like, oh gosh, they just support it. You're such a nut, just crazy.
Yeah, you might make a good Republican politician according to The Guardian.
We need to get that guy on here because he may be like, sorry, these people are nuts.
My bad.
My bad, bro. That was 2010. I was high when I said that. So yeah, he doesn't. He's like, I'm really sorry about that. You guys are right. They're evil. But it's so true. Okay, this is getting into the modern weeds. Exorcist Monsignor Stephen Rossetti.
Yeah, I had read this guy he's got like a blog, and I was like, I don't know, this seems pretty sensational. So I did the homework and found out like, no, this is a real exorcist, a real position. And he just kind of like tells stories, like little vignettes. They're like 3 paragraphs, not long articles, not particularly sensational, but just like, hey, this is what we're seeing in the world of exorcism. I don't know if there's an exorcism con or not. I'm not sure.
There is.
Oh, there is.
It's in Fatima every year.
Okay.
I haven't been. I
Well,
can't
that
go.
joke
I'm not an
blew up in
exorcist.
my face.
They don't call it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Sorry. That's a real thing.
Do not mock, Steve.
Yeah. So he's performing an exorcism on a woman named Lucy who had an abortion, and in the process he demands that the demon gives up its name, which typically when the demons reveal their name, they're weakened. They lose some of their power. And I don't know quite how to pronounce this, but it's like Abizu, something to that effect, which throughout history, like in the ancient Near East, was a demon associated with infant mortality and child death, and for miscarriage as well. And so this happens, the demon's name is revealed, and the demon begins taunting Lucy for having abortion, insisting that she could not be forgiven even though she had repented for it, which this gets us right into the heart of things, I think, right here. The devil, like, we can fixate, all these different things, and pro-lifers can be called like, oh, you guys are so judgmental, you're condemning women. No. We're not condemning women. It's the devil that's condemning the women. We're a movement of mercy. Otherwise, you don't welcome an Abby Johnson back into the fray. You don't welcome a Bernard Nathanson back into the fray. We are the ones who are merciful. It's the devil who's going to say, yeah, there's no hope.
Every woman who's had an abortion knows that better than all of us combined. And this is what we hear from them. And that's the nature of sin. And it's the beauty of our Lord, is that the worst thing is not the sin itself. It's believing that you are that sin and you're irredeemable.
Judas
is the example. Peter's a total loser. We all know that. But
that's why I named my son Peter. No, for real.
But he repents.
Right.
He repents, and that is the power. And the devil cannot. We have so much power over evil because we can accuse ourselves and repent. And that's exactly what he does. He is tempter and he's accuser. And right when you sin, he is the roaring lion looking for someone to devour. And we forfeit our power over him until we repent. And that is such a beautiful message. The alternative is depressing because the alternative is what the devil is saying, which is, look at you. Look at what you did.
Yeah.
You think you're some kind of Christian? You think you're worthy of anything? You killed your own baby? He creates all those talking points. And that's why it's so important. That's why we talk to more women when they come out of the abortion facility than when they go in.
That's true. A lot of times. Yeah.
I mean, there's just a vulnerability there and an openness, and they realize, oh, you were actually here for me. And we're talking about moving on from that day already.
So this Monsignor Rossetti was doing another exorcism for a woman, and again got the demon's name, which was Baphomet, which is, I don't know which emphasis you put on this, which syllable, but this is like the sort of like crazy, freaky goat demon idol that you've seen like the satanic clubs putting in their capital. Like, oh, you've got a nativity? Yeah. We'll put this weird goat thing in there. And the woman had an abortion, and the possessed woman revealed to Monsignor Rossetti that the demon said she'd had an abortion, and so the gates of hell were locked. There was no getting out. Now that, of course, is a lie from the Prince of Lies, who was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. But she said that, the demons made her feel the same emotional and physical sensations as the abortion did. Oh. So this is scary stuff, and I think it's why we so often talk about not only are we the last sign of hope, but we're that first sign of mercy that a woman needs to know and is maybe not hearing from it. I mean, even the abortion industry itself, they're not going to say she can be forgiven, because they any woman who regrets her abortion, they cancel, right? They get rid of her. You don't have a voice. You don't speak for anybody else. But
or they say, oh, that's the religious zealots that are pushing their beliefs on you.
Yeah.
You don't really feel that way or believe that, or you'll get past that.
Mm-hmm. I think it's so interesting, we've done a couple of podcasts earlier in the year about like the trans movement. If you say like, look, a man who says he's a woman is not a woman, like, you're committing genocide by denying the existence of trans people. Okay, aren't they denying the existence of women who regret their abortions, of which there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of them. No mercy.
The African Cardinal Sarah,
Yes.
who we're all big fans of. The Power of Silence, one of his many great books. Just Google him and read everything he has to say. He had a great quote about the trans movement, about the trans ideology, not the trans people, but he said that the satanic rejection of your own gender is a reflection of your rejection of God's love for you. Because it's who he made you. So it's a simple quote, as many of his quotes are very just to the point. But he said it's a satanic rejection. It's an evil rejection because it's who you are.
And that's what I've heard exorcists say too. I've heard a few of them say that.
Because you're not finding yourself, you're rejecting yourself. It's the opposite.
There's a patristic tradition that suggests that the reason Satan fell, rejected God, will not serve, was because he's okay serving God, but refused to serve a God who was willing to debase himself by becoming man, to humble himself by taking on flesh. And I think we see a lot of that in abortion. I think we see it in the trans movement. I think we see it in some of this transhumanist stuff where we're now going to live in the metaverse or whatever. We are rejecting our own bodies, rejecting our own flesh, just as Satan did. And abortion is certainly one manifestation of that.
We have a positive ending to this podcast, but before we get to that, are we getting into Teresa?
We could do that quickly. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is just one more sort of case study where Teresa Piccola, ordinary wife and mother, ends up possessed and believes that abortion was a channel of it. All sorts of paranormal activity in her home. Particularly, she was a church-going woman, but she'd break into trembles when she was in church. And I wanted to reference her simply because she's got this great quote here, which I think is the key to battling the devil as pro-lifers or just as Christians in any capacity. She said, "Humility is the key. When we are broken, such as I was wounded and broken, we must learn how to forgive, and not just others, but ourselves. We likewise must look to the church as the wounded body of Christ. We have the power to pray, and through that prayer, to heal and repair." And I think that is the bottom line here.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to end it, and it just shows people aren't supposed to be walking around being afraid of possession. That's the last thing we should be doing. But it's the acknowledgement of evil and the faith. It all boils down to faith of being able to combat and win those battles against a temptation. The devil has no power over us. He can only put ideas and our opportunities in front of us, and we can reject those through prayer, through fasting, as our Lord said. Some demons can only be driven out through prayer and fasting, and it's just a beautiful thing. I do think, have you ever heard one of these like cool Christian speakers be like, the reason that the Avengers are popular is because we want a hero, and Jesus needs to be your hero. This is like a fad, which is fine. It's cool. Mm-hmm. I think on the opposite end, I think it's mainly IP, and they want to make a fortune with all these Avenger movies, but that's different. That's a movie podcast. I'm not a fan of the Avengers, but I am a fan of Jesus. On the opposite end, this evil thing has become popular with all of these really bad movies. I mean, they just released another Exorcist movie. I'm not going to see it, but the fact that they're still trying to go back into this when evil doesn't exist, supposedly. And what I have noticed is there have been times in our secular world where evil is permitted to be acknowledged. So 9/11, everybody's heart's warm because you stop what you're doing, you walk down to your neighborhood church, and you start to pray. Nobody's talking about the Republicans or the Democrats. It's just, what happened today? Evil. What led to 9/11? Evil. School shootings, and I think it's horrible. It's inevitable, I guess, but that it gets into guns and all that, and that's the immediate debate. There's no even mourning anymore. It's sad because these things happen so often, but everybody will say, you go into an elementary school and you stick a gun in a 3-year-old or 5, 6-year-old kid's face and you pull the trigger, Everybody in America, the guy at The Guardian, evil.
Until the trans person did it.
Until the trans person did it. And that's my only fear is we get so divided and so polarized that evil's no longer permitted. But I still think that it is. I think that there are times where we have a glimpse and we it's like Peter Kreeft said about 9/11. We got out of we got hit by the Tower of Babel and got out of our psychobabble. Great line. That is a great line. Great line. Because it snapped us into reality. People hate us, they're motivated to kill us, and they'll do anything possible. And that desire is evil. And I think that the only redeeming part of as ironic as it is, of October in general is people are like, yeah, I think evil exists. Now, whether they say that on November 1st, on All Saints Day, is a different story.
One of the wild parts about it, though, is in an increasing number of spaces, particularly entertainment and literature and movies and whatnot, evil has become sympathetic. Like now, and here's the one where the bad guy is actually the good guy.
Yes.
And I think that seems like this is where like the British people, when they pounce on this podcast and make fun of us for like, oh, you make a good Republican politician, they'll bring this sort of thing. Oh, come on, just a cute story. Like, why can't the witch from the Wizard of Oz be the good guy? I don't know. I think it's a subtle way of allowing us to accept, if not outright evil, at least an acceptance of moral relativism. Yeah, sometimes you just have to do the wrong thing.
Or you just turn it over on its head. Evil is good and good is evil.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, the dragon is funny.
Yeah,
and he's your buddy now. But that's what makes great classic stories is good versus evil, and the characteristics of each having those and possessing those.
This is where you should be encouraged by one of your favorite movies, the Lord of the Rings popularity.
Absolutely.
Like everybody gets that movie and grasps that movie solely because of the battle between good and evil.
And as we picked on our friend at The Guardian, we will brag on the Brits. They did a survey. It's very famous. They ended up doing it over and over again because they hated the results. The academics hated the results. Greatest literature of all time produced by England. They asked their own people. Far and away, Lord of the Rings.
All right.
He crushes Shakespeare. Jane Austen. These
Dickens.
Oh my gosh, it's endless. The Brits can write. It's been great. Lord of the Rings, and they viewed Tolkien as like he wasn't properly educated, and he's just like writing about hobbits, and it's so silly. And by the way, that was before the movies came out. That's what makes it so powerful, because it's not like I love Peter Jackson and I want to be Frodo. It was before it got popularized by the movies, this survey. So they did it 3 times.
Wow.
And it just went up of the popularity of Lord of the Rings. And it's because of that great story of just good and evil and divine providence. Divine providence is really the theme of Lord of the Rings. So
I don't want you to leave out the end of this quote, which I think is a great way to end this, is from Teresa Piccola. No one is beyond God's mercy. Everyone has a unique purpose. And that is a message that we hear from former abortion workers, from quitters. No one is beyond God's mercy. So,
absolutely. The hopeful ending to our Exorcism demonic abortion podcast, however you want to label this. We'll put it all in the Google alerts. But be sure to rate, review, and share this podcast. Give us your feedback. And I want to, before we get off, repeat that episode where we did talk about the Satanists doing abortions. That is podcast 8, season 8, episode 9, season 8, episode 9. Give us your feedback, the good, the bad, and the ugly on any of the many topics that we covered today. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Heather. We will see you next time.